of the University of Texas at Dallas. It's my pleasure to welcome you here. Connie Constance is cracking the whip and making sure that we keep the meeting on time. So without further delay, it's my privilege to welcome you to our campus. Just a quick snapshot of the university. We're about 16,000 students at UT Dallas. We actually started as a graduate research institute. The founders of Texas Instruments created the University of Texas at Dallas because they wanted to create a magnet for top talent in this area and education of scientists, business people, engineers, and so forth who would meet the needs of this particular region. So we actually have a strong focus on science, engineering, and business. Actually, our business school is our biggest school at UT Dallas, but 82% of all the degrees that we award are in science, engineering, math, and business. And so we don't try to be all things to all people here at this institution, but that focus is the perfect focus, I think, for this region, the technology-intensive companies of this region, and we're very proud of it. We typically have the highest SAT score for entering freshmen of any public university in the state of Texas. We've been a few points higher than UT Austin, although I suspect when the top 10% rule softens a little bit, they'll sneak above us just ever so slightly. Although this is football season, we do not have a football team. Therefore, I can say with total confidence we remain undefeated on the gridiron field. We are an NC2A Division III school, and what that means is that we have intercollegiate athletics, but all of our athletes are truly students first and athletes second. So some of the other Division III NCAA schools include the University of Chicago, Emory University, Caltech, MIT. Johns Hopkins is Division III in all sports except lacrosse. They managed to find one sport where they would give scholarships in. We're very well known for our chess team. In fact, we are taking our consistent national championship chess team to Cuba in a couple of weeks. For the first time in 60 years, a collegiate team from the U.S. is going to Cuba to play their sort of all-star team of collegiate chess. It's amazing. The Dallas Morning News is sending a reporter and a photographer with our team, and I didn't think they sent anybody. I didn't even know they had anybody left to send anywhere, but we're really thrilled that evidently there's a reporter and a photographer that can travel and is going to Cuba with our team. We just came back from the first National Collegiate Debate Tournament of the year. 173 teams competed, and we finished number one and beat them all, including Vanderbilt and Harvard in the semifinals. So we've got a lot of really smart kids here at UT Dallas, focused, as I said, on science, engineering, and business. We are extremely pleased with the Corporate Governance Center. I just can't praise Connie enough and the others involved in creating the center. Leadership is critical for our region, for our nation, and it does matter. And for that reason, we are extremely pleased to be home to this Corporate Governance Institute. It looks like it's starting to rain outside, and it's great to be inside, so welcome, and I hope you have a wonderful day here at UT Dallas. Thank you, and let me invite Connie Constance up. Thank you.
Welcome to the 7th Institute for Excellence in Corporate Governance Annual Corporate Governance Conference. Many of you have been to some of our more recent ones, and a few of you have been with us from the very start. The Institute is an organization of the School of Management supported by the companies whose logos you see flashed on the screen in front of you. These support groups are essential. You'll learn more about them as we move further along. The objective of the Institute is to be the educational source of choice for corporate governance professionals, people such as yourselves. And we want to do this by presenting conferences such as this, by presenting short courses, by presenting specific programs for directors and senior management of specific companies. And in addition, we have a wide variety of short courses that we offer. In addition, as a result of the Institute coming into inception, we now teach 2 courses in corporate governance for our master's degree students. And in the spring, we're bringing aboard a gentleman by the name of McQuiston that you'll be meeting in just a few moments to teach a 3rd course for us in the corporate governance area, again at the graduate level. We have a number of special projects. Some of these are taking corporate governance to the middle market CEOs and directors. We know that there is an area that represents a tremendous opportunity for growth for our nation, yet the knowledge and practice of corporate governance can use some help in that area, and we are moving on a project in that particular area. Similarly, we are doing the same thing for the not-for-profit sector, and we're starting with hospitals. We have set up a relationship with an organization that represents 7,000 trustees of hospitals throughout Texas, and we will be providing programs, including online programs in corporate governance for these individuals. We also have a program that provides women special opportunities to prepare themselves for opportunities as directors and trustees. We participate in programs globally and with foreign universities. In fact, I'm going to Istanbul on December 13th to help them set up a corporate governance center in a new university that has just started in Istanbul. We establish professional relationships also on our own campus. We have been very fortunate, and you'll learn more about this later, in our relationship with the School of Arts and Humanities. And we also are partnering with several of our institutes within the School of Management, such as the Entrepreneur Group and several others, because we feel that corporate governance is a very all-inclusive, very tentacle-like concept that touches practically everything in the business world. Now today, it's our practice that we develop programs that are not just speakers one after another or panels one after another that may or may not have strong linkages to them. Today, we are specifically looking at the nature of our economy, and we're going to dissect that, study that very carefully. We'll start off with our lead speaker teeing us up, setting the theme, and then 3 speakers will come up, and each of them will look at one, the Main Street, one at Wall Street, one Capitol Hill, and perform an analysis. Then at lunch, we will have a noted speaker that will deal with the impact of entitlements and other such foibles and what they portend for the future, economic future, social future of this country. Then we will take a slight divergence, and it's really not a divergence because this is a very, very important point, and we will discuss the role that ethics and characteristics such as greed may have played in the recent debacle that we experienced and are still experiencing. Then we will have a representative of the People's Republic of China who will give us the perspective that Chinese have of what we are currently experiencing. And then we have a panel that will end the session that I will not describe, but you will find most enticing and very thought-provoking. So that is what we have, for the day. Now, we also have a moderator. This is another one of our hallmarks. And most of you know Dennis McQuiston. He's a former banker who consults with financial institutions and other businesses. And when we say Dennis consults, he just doesn't sit across the table from you. He is liable to have his feet in your lapels, or in, but he's very convincing, and you'll see what I mean as the program progresses. It'll be a long day, but Dennis will, get me off the stage here very quickly, and we'll shorten the day. It is now my very great pleasure to introduce our lead speaker. Sharon Allen is chairman of the board of Deloitte LLP, an organization of nearly $11 billion in annual revenues. Her governance responsibilities include leading the efforts of the board to provide oversight and guidance in the management of Deloitte LLP and its subsidiaries. Sharon's influence and governance leadership responsibilities extend beyond the United States. She is a member of the Global Board of Directors of Deloitte Touche Tohmatsu, where she serves as the U.S. representative on the Global Governance Committee and chairs the Global Risk Committee. Frequently honored for her contributions to business and community leadership, for the past 4 years, Sharon has been named to Forbes' list of the 100 most powerful women in the world. Crane New York Business cited her as one of the most powerful businesswomen in New York, and in 2008 she was once again named by directorship as one of the 100 most influential people in corporate governance. Sharon holds a bachelor's degree in accounting from the University of Idaho. In 2004, Idaho presented her with an honorary doctorate in administrative science. So it gives me great pleasure to present to you Dr. Sharon Allen.
Connie, thank you so much. I appreciate your gracious introduction, and I also appreciate all that you do for this conference. All your dedication to it, as well as others, really shows. So thank you for that, and I thank you for your warm welcome. Today, I'd like to begin by turning back the clock, and that's not to lose some daylight, but rather to gain some perspective. So let's look back, all the way back to 1 year ago in October. When October began last year, the mood in Dallas was far from upbeat. Hurricane Ike had paid a visit, business activity was slack, and even the Cowboys were coming off a very discouraging Sunday with their arch rival, the Washington Redskins. Fortunately, they had a better result this week. As for boardrooms in Dallas and around the country, the mood wouldn't get much better, because just a few weeks later, an op-ed ran in the Wall Street Journal, and you probably saw it. The headline was blunt: "Where were the boards?" The commentary that followed was equally unvarnished, recounting the fate of companies like Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, AIG, and many others, and how their boards had, quote, according to this article, failed miserably. Now, if you believe, as I do, in the power of corporate governance, to help lead businesses to a better place, reading that piece hurt. Every word in that editorial was stinging. Fast forward to 1 year later, and the question of where were the boards has found a successor. Where is corporate governance today? There's great interest in the answer to that question, especially with all that has transpired in the marketplace since last October. An ongoing recession whose magnitude is second only to that of the Great Depression, ethical breakdowns in the C-suite, from frauds of vast proportions to the sale of food products known to be tainted. It also includes executives taking extreme risks, all too frequently rewarded with bankruptcies, forced sales, and tight credit that have helped to fuel our economic nosedive. So, perhaps it's no surprise where corporate governance now finds itself, and that's under a harsh light. Today, corporate governance has a lot of critics, and some with reason. Many things have gone wrong. Many players have been involved. Some, a few at least, reckless CEOs, and some, a few at least, passive boards, to those lending far beyond their authority, and to those borrowing far beyond their means. This conference has challenged us to consider governance practices from the vantage point of Main Street, Wall Street, and Capitol Hill. And in doing so, I see hope for a better tomorrow. The truth is that our system of corporate governance is generally comprised of talented, committed individuals with every incentive to raise the bar. And they find themselves with many natural intersections of influence between business and government, between risk and reward, between companies and stakeholders. So today, instead of presenting an overview of the challenge that we face, I'd like to present an overview of the opportunity we must seize to make corporate governance everything that we know it can be. Now, my vision of the future includes the recognition of good governance as a highly valued corporate asset. I've always believed that good governance equates with, that's what good governance equates to when it is sound and if not superior in economic performance. Think about it. Would you knowingly invest in companies with poor corporate governance? That doesn't make any sense. And personally, I think all of us would sleep better at night knowing that we're invested in and are associated with companies whose boards are strong and independent, and they exhibit diversity of thought, and they challenge assumptions by asking the right questions. But we don't have to rely on common sense alone to believe that good corporate governance can help generate positive returns. Now, over the past few years, the results of studies from Australia, Germany, Korea, Switzerland, and the UK have found that companies who practice good governance perform better than those who don't. Their findings have been bolstered by 2 research studies recently conducted in the United States. In one, the corporate library created a hypothetical mutual fund that they called the Governance Alpha Fund. You may be familiar with the corporate library, a governance research and rating organization, and they're often viewed as clearly geared toward activist investors. Their corporate library research is credible and often offers interesting insights. In the research that I'm referring to, it constructed the Governance Alpha Fund by deliberately excluding companies it had identified as having poor governance processes and high governance risk. And as a result, it effectively created an index of companies whose common denominator was good governance. Now, that index fared well. From 2003 through 2008, the Governance Alpha Fund generated an annualized return of 11.9%, almost 3% higher than returns from the Russell 1000 index over the same period. And another study conducted by Audit Integrity, which is an independent financial research firm, also found that good governance is good business. By monitoring risk related to corporate accounting and governance practices, Audit Integrity compiles a metric they call AGR, which stands for Accounting and Governance Risk. It found that the companies with the highest AGR, which stands ratings in the 2008 period, outperformed those with the lowest by 22%. Furthermore, the company's research indicated that corporate governance is a reliable predictor of financial performance in periods of market volatility, as we had in 2008, or over longer periods of time. Extending its AGR scores back over the past 10 years, Audit Integrity found a difference between its top and bottom-rated companies of more than 15%. Now, these two studies indicate that there is real value in good governance. After all, companies with little transparency and weak governance practices have greater potential for regulatory actions, shareholders litigation, and bankruptcy, none of which is known for boosting stock price. In the future, boards charged with oversight and scrutiny may be increasingly measured and scrutinized themselves. And frankly, I think that's okay. It gives boards the opportunity to demonstrate their great worth for all to see. And ultimately, I believe that management and stakeholders scarred by the worst economic environment in 80 years will recognize that good governance is essential and that its value is both intrinsic and financial. The second aspect of my vision for the future is diverse board composition. Now, in my view, a key element is this composition in giving companies and stakeholders the good governance that they deserve. I'm a huge college basketball fan. I know it's football season, but I like basketball. And there's something about the disparate talents that come together as one in the basketball arena that attracts me to the sport. And to me, nothing showcases that better than the beauty of the really perfectly executed fast break. And while the dunk is really the thing that brings everybody to their seats, or from their seats, we have to appreciate all the efforts that bring us to that point. So the rebound that redirects the momentum in the other direction, the crisp outlet pass, the midcourt that gains the advantage, the perfect lob pass to a player swooping in from the wing. No one player could have done that all themselves. Everyone involved knows their role and they execute it with precision. And when they do, every player makes the whole greater than the sum of the parts. Well, such transformations are just as impressive when we assemble disparate talents in a boardroom. As a board chairman, which I spend a good part of my time doing, there is nothing more gratifying than seeing directors work together to challenge, to question, and debate as they research important decisions. And when that happens, the chemistry is obvious, and the results are impressive. Board composition hasn't really received a lot of attention in the media, but the role of boards in recent corporate mishap has invited greater scrutiny of board dynamics and of the board members who set those dynamics in place. That's why I believe board composition could become the next area of emphasis for corporate governance. Perhaps by mandate, as the SEC has provided revisions to its proxy rules and access and disclosure of director qualifications and chairman independence. From my perspective, board composition is all about having the right mix of people involved in the boardroom. That can mean a lot of things. It can mean having the expertise and experience and the skills available to assess the specific areas of risk. It can mean realizing that we're not as informed as we should be on a particular topic and asking outside experts to join in the discussion. It can mean having diversity, and I mean the diversity of thought, that are necessary to approach an issue from the many different aspects. And it can mean having people on your board who are comfortable entertaining different ideas, different views and opinions, and who won't sit still when conformity is enforced in the sake of consensus. That last point is a really crucial one. Boards can encourage trouble if they seek to avoid conflict and achieve consensus by choosing not to evaluate ideas critically. This pattern of behavior, which can be known as groupthink, if it's allowed to set in, it can be a persistent stain that colors every decision that a board may make. And as we've seen over the last few years, the impact of what people do on boards or don't do can reach far and wide. Electing the right complement of people for the boardroom has as much potential for reward and risk as selecting the right leadership for the C-suite. Making sure that boards have the right individuals in place is a necessary step if we are to advance corporate governance. And that leads me to the third major aspect of my vision for corporate governance. In the broader political economic perspective, boards can grow even more as centers of influence. Boards are uniquely situated at many crossroads, and by leveraging their position, boards can take a leadership role in orchestrating, balancing, and bringing into focus the various interests that converge at those many intersections. It won't be easy. As much as we'd like it to be true, there is no global positioning system that basically will help guide corporate boards and governance. It would be terrific, obviously, if we could just flip a switch and enter a particular corporate destination like sustained growth and let the comforting voice come across the speakers and tell us which way to turn and what to avoid and how to reset our course if required. But since no governance GPS is available, corporate governance requires talent, bright, inquisitive people to step back and see the bigger picture. And that's possible by continually taking soundings of the company's internal and external environment. When those soundings are consolidated across an array of variables, then the picture they form can help boards assess a company's position relative to its goals. Of course, the greatest traffic occurs at intersections. When those places where boards are positioned strategically between business and government, risk and reward, companies and their shareholders. And while these intersections are where many competing interests may come together, there's no more compelling place for a board to be. A few years ago, I gained a remarkable insight into the synergy that's possible at such intersections. My firm's global organization, Deloitte Touche Tohmat's, was having our annual world meeting in Singapore. And one of the highlights of our meeting was a special session that our delegates had with the founder of modern Singapore, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. And when Mr. Lee became Prime Minister in 1965, he took leadership of Singapore that he said many years later, in quote, was an improbable story. It should not exist. He said that Singapore had no shared culture among its mixed population from China, Malaysia, and others, and almost no natural resources. But under his leadership, Singapore invested heavily in educating its people and developing industries that could employ them. And by the time Mr. Lee left office in 1990, his governance had turned a hot, humid jungle island into a sparkling city-state that has long been recognized as an economic powerhouse. Now, you may not agree with his methods of discipline in Singapore. It is hard, nevertheless, to argue with success. And what captivated me most was not Mr. Lee's story of Singapore's transformation, but his vision for Singapore in the years to come. Mr. Lee was then 83 years old and known as Minister Mentor. He told our audience that he perceived Singapore's strategic location between China and India as a magnet of opportunity. He visualized Singapore's future role as an intermediary between two powerful nations, a natural intersection, where commerce, politics, and mutual interests can come together to get things done. Now, there's a lesson here for all of us, and not coincidentally, because Singapore has some of the best corporate governance practices in Asia, according to Credit Lyonnais. Intersections are important. They enable us to choose and move in bold new directions. The future direction of corporate governance must lead us to another crucial junction, that special place where trust and confidence intersect with free markets to generate real value. We can begin to approach that intersection through a renewed sense of leadership from everyone in the boardroom, not just the chairman or the lead director. We need leadership from those in the boardroom to act responsibly and to create a special environment, one of commitment and mutual respect that's demonstrated through consistent example. From there, leaders can get down to business and oversight by encouraging and embracing all aspects of diversity, including diversity of thought, asking the right questions and balancing the need to support and, when appropriate, engage and respectfully challenge management. With the right environment and people in place, board leadership can more effectively address what is perhaps the biggest challenge today: risk oversight. And I'd like to share just a few quick lessons that I've learned about risk during my career. First, all risk cannot be engineered away. And risk engineering is no substitute for a strong moral compass. While technology can help boards assess risk, it takes more to make ethical decisions or foresee unintended consequences. The fundamental responsibilities of corporate governance, oversight, and input do not lend themselves to algorithms or pre-programmed solutions. That's why some people can still beat computers at chess. The ability to adapt and innovate, coupled with the uniquely human elements of curiosity, judgment, and perspective, is what corporate governance is, and it makes it an art, not a science. Second, risk is best managed across the enterprise. Now, I'm often asked by audit committees and boards how best to fulfill their responsibility as it relates to risk. Sometimes it seems a bit overwhelming. And, I think as I look at it, and even at what we've done in our own organization, I will say that clearly the experience is better if it's approached across the enterprise. You can't take individual little one-off pieces of the organization and think you're really managing risk. It's better to be viewed holistically and integrate a discussion of risk at every decision. Some think, oh, that's too hard. How do we get that done across the enterprise? But I can tell you from our own experience, and we consult with clients all the time on enterprise risk. We decided we better implement it ourselves in our organization. And we found, indeed, that it helped. And to look at it holistically was not so hard, but was enlightening and rewarding. Third, be risk intelligent. Now, that's a term that we use at Deloitte for organizations that use a process of thorough risk assessment as a prerequisite for informed decision making. Today, it's not enough for boards to be risk aware. True, boards can help companies avoid losing money by being risk aware. But boards that are risk intelligent recognize that risk is like cholesterol. There is good and bad. And far too many people tend to forget that companies can grow by taking smart, well-considered risks. Risk-aware companies can survive, but risk-intelligent companies can thrive. One final lesson. Scenario planning and risk assessments provide real value. Boards can continually scan the horizon or imagine the unimaginable, and they can better recognize emerging issues and risks that they carry. Anticipation like this provides an important buffer and time to prepare. It can mean the difference between developing a playbook of resources through calm and careful deliberation or reacting urgently in a time of crisis. Which path we choose is up to us. So where do we go from here? Well, I grew up on a farm in Idaho, and I learned from my dad that it takes persistent investment of time and effort to grow anything worthwhile. During my 36 years with Deloitte, I've learned that good governance is one of the most important investments any business can make. And we have to keep it, especially in difficult times, and keep at it. For good governance, good corporate governance, to grow in value and accountability and trust. That's why I have a challenge for businesses everywhere. To raise the bar for corporate governance, and I urge all of us to not stay parked just at that very dangerous intersection, that place where the immovable object that is corporate governance today may once again collide with the irresistible force that is government regulation tomorrow. Instead, I urge you and your boards to actively engage with others at as many intersections as you can, to create a new intersection of leadership, ethics, and risk oversight to help corporate governance continue to move forward. In closing, let's not wait for regulatory mandates or further public outcries to improve corporate governance. Let's do it ourselves. Let's be independent in thought and fact. Let's be transparent, especially on board composition. And let's consider risk across every aspect of our businesses. And above all, let's ask ourselves tough questions. And once we answer them, let's do what we must, so that Main Street, Wall Street, and Capitol Hill can converge with another triumphant of U.S. political economy: accountability, value, and trust. Thank you so much for allowing me to kick off this program. It is such an honor to do so. And if we have a bit of time, I'd welcome questions.
Yes, Sharon, we do have a bit of time, and if somebody would like to ask Sharon a question, I'll get over to you with the microphone. So just, Angelina, let me ask you to stand up here. It's 9 o'clock in the morning, actually 9 o'clock at night, Chinese time, so if you can think of something to ask her, go right ahead.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Sharon, for an excellent presentation. You were talking about compensation of boards, and we were just talking about that coming in this morning. How does Deloitte look at composition of its boards? How do you select board members? What are the criterion? And what are key issues that you look at in terms of issues that your board is considering for dealing with this crisis? Well, dealing with the aftermath of this crisis.
Right, right. Well, we have a rather unique situation, probably not unique to professional services firms, but we, as a private partnership, we actually our board are made up of all insiders in that they are all partners of our organization. Now, that has a good side and downside. The good point is that everyone on our board really understands our business. The downside is that you can, miss having that external view, and there's always benefit to having an external view. Our board members, by the definition of our partnership agreement, are elected among our 3,000 partners. And I can tell you, our partners, 3,000 of them, are every bit as interested in good governance as our shareholders. So we go about that process and elect them, and there's still that important question, what do we look for? Who do we want to serve on that board? What are their competencies and what are their experiences? And I can tell you, independence of thought, being willing, especially in a boardroom when we are all insiders. The only one who really doesn't report in some way to our CEO is me, because I am independently elected I am a partner, full-time partner, I'm an executive chairman. But I report to our board, not to our CEO, and that's very intentional, of course, so that I have that independence of in the room. And really ability to represent the entirety of our organization. So we have that diversity of experience across the organization, various functions, the businesses that we're in, because we're in audit, consulting, tax, and financial advisory, so we represent it across the board. And then what we do in order to check the box and really bring value into the organization from external viewpoints is we bring outsiders into our boardroom and sit with us at the board table. So when we are dealing with succession, as an example, in our organization, we brought the woman from GE that basically is responsible for development and succession in GE to sit with us for 3 hours in our boardroom and talk about what they do and we do, and they got interchange of ideas. So I think, frankly, any board can benefit from some of that. Even once you get a board in place, there's still competencies you may lack, and those boards can benefit from that kind of exchange.
Well said. Yes, I'll get over to you here. While I'm working my way over to you, I would tell you that there are many of you in this room, many of us in this room, who belong to the National Association of Corporate Directors. And right. You don't know this, Sharon, but I'm one of the faculty members of the Board Advisory Services for NACD. We had a conference call last month, and just to show you that she's on target, what was basically said, Suzanne Hopgood runs that organization, and she said board composition is fast becoming the #1 issue from being the #2 issue. We're still looking at strategy and risk, but board composition is fast becoming almost the #1 issue that boards are looking for to get more information on. So you're right on target. So thank you very much for that.
I'm glad to know that.
Yeah.
Sharon, I'd like to ask you, as being one of the big 4 international firms, what at your board level are you, and what do you probably think the other big 3 besides yourselves boards are thinking about as far as maybe the black swan that's out there? Or what are your 1 or 2 things that could really keep, or maybe do really keep you awake at night as board members of these huge organizations that are so important to international commerce?
Yeah. Well, I think a terrific question. And I think the boards in these public accounting firms, and ours happens to have the consultancy that is incorporated into it as well, I think are very consistent, in their approach to those things keeping us awake at night. The risks, the enterprise-wide risks and so on that we take into account as our clients are. And as our clients' businesses go in many ways, so do ours. And so all of the kind of the regulatory environment combined with assuring that there is the appropriate processes in place, the appropriate attention being paid to this notion of enterprise risk that I talked about is definitely one of the things that is top on our minds. So we think about it in the context of our clients, and then we also think about it in the context of our own organization. Additionally, I think every enterprise today, ours is certainly kind of a top among those because our business is our people. But I think every enterprise today should be at least focusing on talent and future talent and how to deal with future talent. In the kind of situation we're in right now in the economic environment, it's easy to kind of go beyond that and worry more about right-sizing the organization and having the right kinds of metrics rather than thinking more fully about the long term and really thinking about what is the future for talent within our organization? And there are so many strategic issues that I think the C-suite and the boards in today's organization should be undertaking in that. When you think about it, for one thing, while there's plenty of availability of people today and talent today, in the future, there's still a lot more retiring baby boomers than there are young people in the next generation coming along into the workforce. And there is still a huge challenge in being inclusive in how we both recruit and retain and develop the talent within ours and other organizations. And so when you really want to get down to what's going to be the long-term kinds of things that are important, I think talent is again, one of those things that is very, very important.
Well, Sharon, there's one of my favorite Dilbert cartoons where Alice is reporting to the boss, and the boss has given her an assignment to do a risk management assessment of the organization, and she concludes that there is absolutely no risk of any management, so that's the issue there. Okay, Carl, stand up.
No risk of any management. You of course won't mind when I borrow that. That's
It absolutely
with
is a
that
great
full
one.
attribution,
It really
of course.
is, thank you.
I'm going to ask you a question that I wish I didn't have to ask, and that is...
Well, then just don't. Oh, no,
No.
I'm sorry.
Audit committees have gone through a big transformation as both definition of what they do and the requirement for a financial expert. Compensation committees have gotten a lot more definition. What do you see happening from a regulatory and from an exchange standpoint as far as new requirements and new definitions for governance committees' responsibilities?
Yes. And in particular, those that are kind of aiming at the question about a risk committee, I mean, I think that certainly has a lot of focus right now about whether that would be, does it fall under the governance committee, does it fall under finance, or will there have to be a separate risk committee? I mean, I think, once again, I'm going to show a little bias here about thinking that I believe if we are smart in corporate America, we're going to take the actions that we need to be taking to our governance and executive suites specifically and directly first, so that government doesn't have to do that, right? But we know that that's not happening today. And I think that, my concern would be that we focus on the results and the needs, not the, how a particular organization takes on the process. I think risk obviously needs to be undertaken. It's a big part of my speech. It's a big part of what I talk about all the time. And that's probably one of those things that's most focused on as kind of an add-on, if you will, to board committee structures. Clearly, compensation and succession now, and there's a lot of focus on that today, particularly around the B of A announcement this morning. And there's a lot of other things that have been consistently there and kind of keep getting refocused by the government. But I believe risk is the one that we're going to have to most watch how they deal with it. Yes. Just a quick follow-up here, and I'll repeat it. So you can ask and then I'll repeat your question.
The companies that I see on that board will probably do what you're saying. They will take responsibility. They'll take leadership. They're large corporations. They're very responsible. But a lot of the composition, particularly the NASDAQ and Amex, are more mid-sized, smaller companies. And the work I do, I don't see them having understanding for nor appreciation for governance in the way you're speaking about, and as it being a catalyst for a lot of the problems we've had. So I'm really trying to focus.
So you're focusing on, beyond, kind of on those boards, NASDAQ level boards, smaller organizations, maybe those that are just every day trying to, develop and survive the business aspects and not paying as much attention to the governance aspects, in spite of the fact that if they would really think through that, they'd recognize their governance aspects are their business aspects, right? And to the extent that is the case, it's these kinds of conferences that we have right here. It's the influence that can come, hopefully, from corporate America, academia, and others who can continue to help and guide those companies to kind of think more fully about their governance practices and the importance of them. I think sometimes it's a matter of not knowing how to go about it, probably not understanding how do we put the best practices into place, how do we even structure a good governance process. And I will tell you, even from a professional services standpoint, when I took the role of chairman 6 years ago, we had a fine board, but we didn't have a role model board. And I think at the time, there were a lot of things 6 years ago going on in our profession, and still are. But there was a very clear expectation that we needed to take on and really go for becoming a role model board. And I found there were resources to help me do that. I looked to programs like this. I looked to outsiders. There's plenty of, written about what makes great boards great, which is a Sonnenfeld piece. There's plenty to look to. It's just a matter of helping each other almost in getting that done. And I think it's a valid interest and objective.
Sharon, thank
Yes.
you. And I would put in a plug for the folks here at the Institute. Connie and his group and some
Yes.
advisors have started this thing he mentioned earlier to deal with mid-management companies, because, Carl, the thing you're talking about, the two boards you serve on where you're on the head of the audit committee, they are smaller companies in terms of big, but they're big anyway. And so that's one of the things that this institute is going to try to do. So Max,
And
stand
I
up here.
compliment you for doing that, because I think really it has an important place for the future for these companies.
Sharon, I wondered, I don't know if any of your clients are among the dead and wounded that just in the financial situation we're just coming through, but I wonder if there are, if you've done any postmortems for either the audit committees or their boards in terms of being risk intelligent, and you could share with us some of the, let's say, the problems that you uncovered.
Great question, Max.
It's a terrific question, and yes, unfortunately, some of them are among the dead and wounded, but really, for instance, Merrill was a client of ours for many years, and it's quite a shock, you know, when you go over a weekend and a client that you've had for so many years is gone on Monday, acquired, and of course, there's many stories about that since, right? But yes, I mean, we have done a lot of work, not only with our clients, but importantly with ourselves as well. You know, I think everyone after the last year has appropriately kind of gone back and looked at the postmortem and said, what if, what different? Even if, you know, everybody believed all the right things were being done all the way along, well, then how did this happen? And I think it's important that everybody just step up to that and recognize that the very best thing you can do is look at it, understand, okay, we might say that that was the right thing to do, perfectly compliant with every regulatory and you know, professional standard, but what would we have done differently knowing now what we know? And I think we are helping clients do that, and we're also doing that internally to our organization. I think it's important to do that.
Yeah, I expect that in retrospect you would have said to Mr. O'Neill, what in the hell do you think you're doing buying these subprime mortgage companies? It's one thing you would have said, don't you think?
Well, you know, you're not going to put words in my mouth. Not going to come up in a quote, so no.
Sharon, thank you for your comments. David Gonzalez. A quick question. You've raised the issue of governance as something that many of these great companies already do. But what responsibility do CEOs have to come together to really raise this as a larger societal issue around the world? And what processes are in place? And are you even thinking in that way? I like to say great alone, but better together. So are CEOs coming together?
That's a terrific question. I think, you know, if I'm realistic and step back from it and I think about today's world, and I think so much is being done in individual boardrooms and within the individual C-suites, and truly trying to assure that each company individually is doing the right thing, or trying to recover, or trying to make adjustments, trying to make changes. They're surviving in so many ways, and trying to move to the point where they're going to thrive rather than survive. And so, you know, I believe that it is true that there's less of that, you know, kind of coming together process right now than there might be, or could be, and should be. You know, there are the Association of Corporate Directors as an example. There's the Business Roundtable. There are the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is having its own, you know, challenges right now. And you know, there are places where these executives do connect, and it's important that they do that. But I believe, realistically, right now, people are very much in the bunkers. They're focusing on, you know, what is happening today within their own organization, and perhaps not yet moving out as much as they could or should. And I think it's a great challenge, frankly.
Yeah. Okay, we're just about out of time, Sharon. You have exactly the last 2 minutes to either reaffirm what you had told us before or add something new, and
Great.
So just go right ahead.
Well, thank you. And thanks again for all of you being here. I think that it is a clear indication of the level of your interest and consideration of importance that corporate governance today plays in corporate America and beyond. And so I would just challenge you to fully engage with the other speakers today. It's a great lineup of speakers. I regret that I can't be here for all of them because I've got another commitment, but I think it's a terrific lineup of speakers who will help all of us kind of broaden our own horizons and make that next step as we can in our own organizations to focus on governance and what it can do to really be a real asset, which I believe it could be. So thank you for your generous time, and have a terrific day for the rest of the day.
Sharon Allen of Deloitte, ladies and gentlemen.